The call came just before noon. The voice on the other end was shaky, urgent, someone from Derek's phone. Your son's being prepped for emergency surgery. They need you at St. Luke's right now. I didn't even stop to change. I grabbed my coat, my purse, and drove with one hand on the horn most of the way. My chest thudded in time with the turn signals. The whole drive I pictured him in pain tubes, stitches, beeping monitors, a doctor asking for consent because I was still listed as next of kin. Inside the hospital, I didn't even make it to the front desk before a young nurse locked eyes with me and rushed forward. "Marva Ellington," she asked quickly. I nodded, breathless. "Don't go in," she said, voice tight. "Please, just hide. It's a setup." I blinked. "What?" But she didn't explain. She only nodded toward a door marked "or prep, sterile access only." She whispered, "You need to trust me," then stepped away just as fast. Something in her eyes froze my feet. I inched forward and looked through the side window of the swinging double doors. Derek was inside, standing. Not in a gown, not attached to machines. He was fine. Laughing with a doctor, holding a manila envelope, looking eager, relaxed, not a trace of panic. I pressed back from the door, heart stuck mid-beat. This wasn't a surgery. It wasn't even a patient emergency. It was a show, a trap, and I had nearly walked straight into it. I moved back down the hallway, slowly, eyes wide, mouth dry. I slipped into a family consultation room and sat hard on the plastic chair. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone. I didn't call Derek. I didn't call his wife. I called Danielle Shore. I hadn't spoken to her in 5 years, but I knew exactly why I needed her now. The nurse found me 10 minutes later, tucked in the family room with my back to the door, fists clenched in my coat pockets. She didn't knock. She just slipped in and locked the door behind her. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said, eyes scanning the hall through the narrow window. "But I've seen this kind of thing before. And you still have time." She handed me a slim folder. My name was on the first page, typed clean bold across the top. Marva Ellington. I flipped through. Healthcare proxy. Financial power of attorney. Emergency guardianship rights. Every line signed. By me. Only I hadn't touched a pen in days. The handwriting wasn't even close. I stared at the signatures, my own name curling up at me like it was mocking my memory. Derek had signed as agent. On the second page, his wife's name showed up under secondary contact. Legal-looking stamps, notarized. The nurse sat across from me quietly. They were trying to process this today. It raised flags, timing formatting. Our team paused it. I couldn't speak. "They listed you as mentally unfit." She continued, her voice low but steady. "Dementia risk. Confusion. Said you were refusing treatment, none of which your medical records support." I felt something shift inside me, not like a snap. More like a door closing. "How did you know?" I asked. She hesitated. "I recognized your name. My sister was in your trauma unit 12 years ago. You sat with her for hours after her accident. She still talks about you." I nodded, pressing the folder against my chest like a shield. "I can't do much," she whispered, "but I'll hold the paperwork. It won't go through today." My voice came out quieter than I meant. "That's all I need." When she left, I stayed in the chair and counted backwards from 10. A grounding trick from my old shift days. My breath steadied by 5. At 2, I stood up, folder still in hand. And I walked out the back exit with a name on my lips I hadn't spoken in years, Danielle. I sat in the stairwell between the second and third floor, the metal railing pressing cold against my spine. I didn't move for a long while, not because I was afraid, because I was stunned that I wasn't. 16-hour shifts 6 days a week. That's what it took back then. I'd come home with swollen ankles and blood under my fingernails and still managed to help Derek with his science homework. I sold my grandmother's necklace to cover the first semester of his college tuition when the loan fell through. When his startup failed, I emptied out my retirement fund without hesitation. Just until you get on your feet again, I told him. And when they wanted to buy their first house, it was my name next to his on that mortgage, my credit, my promise. And now he had stood in a hospital hallway and told someone I was confused, unfit, that I couldn't manage my own life. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink long enough to let one form. My tears had all been used up years ago on smaller betrayals. What I felt now was something else. Precision. I pulled out my phone and scrolled down through old contacts until I found the name I hadn't touched in 6 years. Danielle Shore. She and I had once shared night shifts, double patient codes, and eventually a bottle of cheap champagne the day she passed the bar exam. I tapped the number. She answered on the second ring. Marva. She said like I hadn't vanished after Derek's wedding. You okay? I need legal protection. Today. It's about my son. Her voice sobered fast. Come to my office. Bring everything you've got. I stood, gripped the folder tighter, and headed down the stairwell. Danielle always told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. And right now, I needed someone who wouldn't flinch at what I had to say. Danielle was already leaning against her car when I stepped outside the folder tucked under my coat. The parking lot lights cast long shadows, and she pushed off the bumper the moment she saw my face. No greeting, no small talk. She just opened the passenger door and said, "Get in." We sat in the quiet for a moment before I handed her the folder. She flipped it open, her lawyer's eyes scanning faster than I could follow. Page after page, she shook her head with a slow, controlled disbelief. They forged everything she said, finally, tapping a finger on my supposed signature. But it's sloppy, almost careless. Whoever notarized this didn't check your ID, which means the stamp isn't legitimate. She turned the page. But this isn't about medical authority. This is a financial takeover. A full-scale one. I stared through the windshield, the hospital's glow reflecting off the glass. He said I was confused, I murmured. Unfit. Danielle didn't soften. She never had. That's step one in these cases. They create doubt before they take control. Once the paperwork goes through, they'd have access to your accounts, your property, your retirement, all of it. I thought of Derek's wife, Claudia, smiling too brightly last Thanksgiving. We just want you safe, Marva, she had said. There's a new assisted living community opening. Quiet, comfortable. You'd love it. She'd circled brochures on the table like she was planning a vacation for me. I hadn't realized she was planning a relocation. It all lines up now, I said quietly. The comments, the pressure, the sudden concern. I let the words settle. And now this. Danielle closed the folder. We can stop it. But you need to move fast and keep a low profile. They're counting on you being compliant. I nodded slowly. I won't give them that. She looked at me for a long moment, as if assessing how much of the woman she used to know was still there. Then she started the engine. Good, she said. Because now we start making this right. And that was the moment I understood I couldn't go home. I didn't go home that night. I didn't go anywhere they'd expect. Danielle drove me 2 towns over past farmland and blinking gas stations until we found a roadside motel with peeling shutters and a vacancy sign glowing like an afterthought. I signed in under a different name, Elaine Rowe, my grandmother's name, and paid in cash. No ID. No questions. For 3 days, I became no one. No phone calls. No messages. I turned off my cell completely and tucked it into the Bible drawer beside the bed. I watched the same news loop twice a day, walked the narrow gravel edge behind the motel, and waited. Danielle called the hospital first, then the county office. Quietly, without fanfare, she filed new medical directives, real ones. We had to beat Derek's filing before it went through the system. She made sure mine were stamped and witnessed properly. She contacted the bank's legal team, too. By the second day, my accounts had a freeze tag year on them pending investigation. On the third morning, we went over my living trust in full. You want to add this? Danielle asked her pen, hovering over a new clause. Yes, I said. If any family member commits or attempts medical fraud against me, they're disinherited. No appeals, no exceptions. She didn't ask twice. While I rewrote my future, Derek was leaving voicemails for my primary doctor, the hospital social worker, even one of my old neighbors. Claudia texted me 5 times in one morning. All concern on the surface. All laced with pressure. We're just trying to help Marva. Don't make this harder. They weren't worried. They were scrambling. They thought I'd vanished out of confusion. But I hadn't. I was moving behind the curtain quietly, like I had in every emergency shift I ever worked. No panic. No sound. By the time the motel clerk knocked to let me know I was due to check out, my paperwork was done. Notarized. Filed. And I had one more stop to make before returning. I walked back into my house like nothing had happened. Keys in hand. Same coat on same shoes I'd left in. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon from the oatmeal I made the morning before the call. But the second I stepped into the living room, I saw them. Derek stood first. Claudia was perched on the edge of the couch, smiling like this was a casual drop-in and not a coordinated ambush. There you are, she said sweetly. We were so worried. Derek walked over with forced calm, that same tone he used as a teenager when he knew he was lying. Mom, we're just trying to help you. You've been forgetful lately. The nurse even said you seemed disoriented. I tilted my head like I was straining to remember. Did she? He nodded, relieved. You left your car running last week. You couldn't remember what day it was. You've been under a lot of stress. We just want what's best for you. I kept my hands, still my voice soft. You're probably right. I have felt a little off. Claudia leaned in. We brought the paperwork again. Nothing urgent. Just a formality. I smiled back. Thank you both. I really appreciate you looking out for me. They beamed like they'd just won something. After a few more rehearsed lines about safety and early planning, they stood to leave. We'll stop by tomorrow, Derek said, just in case you're ready. I walked them to the door, nodded warmly, and waved as they pulled out of the driveway. Then I turned, locked the door, and exhaled. The safe deposit box at West Grove Bank held everything, now the real power of attorney. The new trust, the affidavit from Danielle, and most important, the flash drive with camera footage from the hospital hallway. Time-stamped, showing Derek smiling beside a sealed manila envelope while claiming I was in surgery. I placed one more copy in the kitchen drawer beneath the tea towels, just in case. And then I sat at the table and made a list. There were still a few moves left to make. They arrived at 9:02 dressed too formal for a visit and too eager for it to be about care. Derek wore the same gray blazer he used for job interviews. Claudia held a manila folder like it was a wrapped gift, and the woman with them, young stiff, holding a clipboard, introduced herself as a notary. I opened the door wide and smiled. Come in. They stepped inside like they owned the place. Claudia glanced around the living room, eyes briefly landing on the shelf where my nursing plaques sat. Derek cleared his throat. Mom, we brought the paperwork again. Just wanted to make sure you're comfortable and everything's clear. I made tea, I said, already walking to the dining table. Let's sit. They followed, chatting about how supportive this process was and how common it was for adult children to help aging parents plan ahead. The notary nodded politely, but said little. I placed the tray down, poured slowly, then reached into the drawer and laid out the documents they'd left me days earlier. Their copies, the forged ones. You'll need to explain these, I said, tapping my finger on Derek's fake signature and Claudia's unauthorized notary stamp. Their smiles faltered. What? What are you talking about? Derek asked, his voice tightening. The door to the kitchen swung open. Danielle stepped into view, calm and composed, holding a separate folder in one hand and a flash drive in the other. I'd recommend your notary take a step back, she said evenly, because these documents are fraudulent, and any attempt to file them constitutes a felony in this state. The notary paled, stepped away from the table and mumbled something about needing to verify her credentials before hurrying to the door. Derek's mouth opened, then closed again. His hands clenched on the edge of the table. Claudia's voice went high. We didn't know. We thought you knew, I said quietly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Derek turned toward the door without a word, and Claudia followed, blinking hard. Danielle set the real documents in front of me, then nodded once. We weren't done yet. Derek didn't make it far down the walkway before Danielle stepped outside after him calling his name with the kind of tone only a lawyer could manage. He stopped, shoulders tight, as she began listing the statutes he'd violated, each one striking like a hammer. Medical fraud, attempted financial coercion, falsified notarization, exploitation of a vulnerable adult. He tried to talk over her. I didn't exploit anyone. She's my mother. This is all a misunderstanding. Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Every sentence was crisp, measured, undeniable. Claudia hovered behind him, clutching her purse as if it could anchor her. We thought she needed help, she said weakly. She forgets things sometimes. I stepped onto the porch, but said nothing. There was nothing worth adding. A hospital security vehicle pulled up at the curb called earlier by Danielle when we realized how far they intended to push this. 2 officers stepped out, not with handcuffs, but with clipboards ready to take statements. Derek's bravado evaporated. His voice cracked. Mom, please. Can't we talk about this alone? You didn't have to involve anyone else. I looked at him, this grown man who once held my hand crossing streets, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after nightmares, and felt a heaviness settle over everything I thought I knew. I walked back inside without a word. I opened the drawer beneath the cutlery and took out a thick envelope. My living trust. Freshly notarized, refiled, irreversible. When I returned to the doorway, I placed it in Derek's hands. This is the only document that matters now, I said, quietly. He scanned the first page, his face draining as he realized what was missing his name. There was no confusion, no oversight. It was deliberate. Final. My home. My savings. My decisions, I said. All protected. Claudia's breath hitched. Derek looked at me like he didn't recognize who he was staring at anymore. Danielle stepped forward. We're finished here. And for the first time, Derek didn't argue. He just asked, barely audible, what do we do now? The letter arrived on a Tuesday, tucked in among grocery flyers and a coupon booklet I never read. His handwriting hadn't changed much. Still rigid, still trying too hard to be neat. I stood at the kitchen counter, sliced the envelope open, with the same letter opener I'd used on birthday cards and baby shower invites. For a second, I almost braced for remorse. But there was none. It wasn't personal, he wrote. We were struggling. We thought it made sense. It's not like we planned to actually hurt you. I stopped reading there. I folded the letter cleanly once then again and placed it in the same drawer where I kept appliance manuals and expired warranties. It belonged to a category of things I no longer needed, but wasn't ready to throw away. He hadn't apologized. He hadn't asked if I was okay. He just wanted to be understood. But understanding only counts when it comes after truth, not after being caught. That same afternoon, I found a small card in the mailbox, postmarked from the hospital. Handwritten. No return address, just the name L. Renner. Inside it read, "You made me want to stay in this job. Thank you for what you did, for not walking into that room, for knowing your worth. Some of us will never forget it. I sat with the card for a long time, thumb brushing the edge. I remembered her, the nurse who stopped me. Just a flash of bravery, one quiet warning. That was all it took to shift the path of everything. I pulled out a blank card from my desk and wrote only one sentence in return. Don't let anyone call care a weakness. Then I sealed it and sent it back. I didn't hear from Derek after that. Not in person. Not through Claudia. Not even through the neighbors who always seemed to know too much. But silence doesn't always mean regret. Sometimes it just means they're waiting to try again. And I wasn't done watching the locks. The seasons turned without ceremony. Summer folded into a quieter fall, and with it came the soft rhythm of a different kind of life. I wake when I want now. The garden, once a patch of weeds and stubborn soil, grows thick with mint and tomatoes. I pull them up slowly, gently, like something sacred. There's no rush anymore, no shift to prepare for, no emergencies, just quiet. Once a week, I walk to the hospital and volunteer for the afternoon, usually at the front desk or delivering flowers. A few of the newer nurses don't know who I was, but some still do. My nameplate hangs near the trauma ward, faded brass corner scratched. I never asked them to leave it up. I've found a rhythm, not peace exactly, but a stillness, a clarity. In the kitchen, there's only one photo left on the fridge. Not recent, not posed, just Derek at 6 years old, a snow cone in one hand, a grin spread wide like the world hadn't taught him cruelty yet. It was taken during a summer fair. He'd begged for the blue raspberry flavor and stained his whole mouth. That boy, he existed. Once. I don't keep the picture out of sentimentality. It's more of a reminder of what he was, of what I gave, and of what he gave up. I haven't heard from him again, not since the letter. No birthdays, no apologies. And that's fine. I didn't rebuild my life expecting reconciliation. Some things break clean. Others rot from the inside and must be cut out. I don't speak ill of him. Not to the neighbors, not to Danielle, not to myself when I catch his face in old photos. I don't need revenge. That's the part people never understand. I kept my house, my name, my will, but more than that, I kept my quiet. And now when I walk through the front door and lock it behind me, it's not out of fear. It's because I finally know that stillness, when chosen, becomes its own kind of shield.